Buenos días a todos y todas.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Gregorio Saravia from the Spanish Committee of Representatives of Persons with Disabilities, and I would like to thank Plena Inclusión for their invitation to helping me be part of the panel on this conference on access to justice with a roundtable that, as Yoda mentioned, is linked to the experience of people with disabilities and how to interact in their experience interacting with the criminal justice systems. And we have the experience of an ex-defendant, former defendant, and also the victim, the ex-victim of a case. So in Spain, as Enrique Galván, the director of Plena Inclusión, mentioned, in Spain we still have a lot to do. In things that are linked to the human rights of people with disabilities. And we need much more political will from institutions to be able to join or get to be able to guarantee or safeguard the fundamental rights of people with mental disabilities or mental health issues, both in the criminal system and also in prisons. And in the latest report on the National Mechanism to Prevent Torture, and based on the final findings on the report on the report on the rights against culture or other treatment. They called on the Spanish state for a series of practices that don't respect human rights or the mandate of the different human rights treaties that Spain has ratified. And some of these concerns are linked to practices as severe, such as the use of mechanical enforced restraints in the penitentiary system, in the criminal system, because we have reports on forced medication to people who suffer from these physical restraint mechanisms, and also the use of these actions to persons with disabilities that have suicidal tendencies. And, well, the comments of this Committee Against Culture made to the Spanish state say that they have to pay attention to the Tokyo rules and the United Nations regulation for the treatment of women prisoner, known as the Bangkok rules. And they have also asked Spain to reinforce the measures, so they keep on making an effort to implement the right measures based on the dynamic security basis in prisons. It has also called on Spain as a member state to review all their actions to try to abolish these forced restraint cases. And as a result, people with mental and psychosocial disabilities that don't get specialized medical treatment either. And what's important about this morning, and what has to do the committees to respect human rights on an international level, we want to know, well, the idea today is to get to know firsthand the experience of people who have directly been involved in the criminal justice system, and these people that I am honored to be able to introduce today. These people who are going to be here today are, on the one hand, Eduardo Suarez, expert by experience and a trainer in access to justice, and Tanya Petkova, who is a victim and survivor of institutionalization. And both of them have someone to support them, someone that I'd like to introduce. And in the case of Eduardo, it's Sonia Bermejo. She's here with us. And she's the coordinator of the Prisoner and Access to Justice work team of Plena Inclusión. So for many years, she's been helping people with disabilities in the justice system and in prisons. And she met Eduardo in prison, and both Eduardo and Sonia have been providing training for many years around access to justice. And I would also like to introduce Eduardo himself. Eduardo Suarez Limon, he's 45. He lives in Bonares, in Huelva, and he's a trainer by experience in Plena Inclusión Andalusia, where, amongst other things, he trains other people with intellectual disabilities so they are not subject of abuse. He has collaborated, given many talks to security forces, also in professional colleges for lawyers and many other professional colleges. And his objective is to raise awareness around the importance to guarantee access to justice for people with disabilities. And next, I'm going to ask him a series of questions so we can all get to know his experience. Eduardo, if I may, let's start with a few questions. And first of all, Eduardo, why are you here today? Today I'm here, so what happened to me does not happen to anybody else ever again, because I had such a bad time that I don't want anybody to go through it. Okay, tell us, which were the events that led you to prison? Well, I had a family business, strawberries and raspberries. We grew strawberries and raspberries. This happened when I was 27 back then. And so I had a manager. I mean, he did things for me, and I just signed the papers. And at the end, well, some of the papers I was given were not truly legal. And so who came? National police came. They came to the fields where I was working, and they put me in the ground in front of my parents. And well, the worst I've ever gone through. I mean, as if I had killed someone. I did not understand what was happening, and so it was very, very hard. So when you're arrested, you don't know what's happening, right? Or why you're being arrested. No, my parents didn't know either, and they were, surprised and seeing his son being thrown to the ground, and as if he was a criminal, and as if I have done something huge. But I mean, at least talk to me, but don't just throw me, around just like that. And then you were trialed. Tell us about it. How was it? Well, I found a lawyer because I knew nothing about justice, and well, the lawyer told me that it was better to. So there was 6 documents, 6 signatures, and he said that it was better to do it in 6 different trials. But it was much worse for me. I accepted because I was convicted again and again and again, and so I was sentenced to 21 years and 9 months. I had no criminal history or anything else. I had no idea about justice. I trusted the lawyer because I was paying him, and that's what he did to me. And which are the barriers you found? Which one? It has to do with that, right? You did not understand what they did. They did not explain what you were signing. No, nothing at all. And you were not informed about the consequences that this could have for you, right? Yes. And judges, at the end, there was not even a trial. So just stick to 3 years, and because that's better for you, and that's it. And once you were imprisoned, what was your life like in prison? Well, it was very hard. Very weird faces and people with a lot of problems, drugs and true criminals. And really, not something I would recommend to anybody. And once you were in Plena Inclusion's program, what happened? How did it work? Well, thanks to Plena Inclusión, they treated me differently, and my life was much better. But before that, I had to be very careful. They kicked you out of your module, and if you did something, they hit you, and life was very, very hard. So what are you doing now in Plena Inclusión? What are you doing now in Plena Inclusión? Well, what I'm doing now is basically training other people, so what happened to me does not happen to them, so they don't have to go into a justice system without understanding anything. I don't think that's fair. That's right. Would you like to share something else with those who are listening? Yes. I hope nobody else has to go through what I went through. That's it. Given that I had to go through it, I hope nobody else has to go through it again. Thank you very much, Eduardo. Please, huge hand for Eduardo. Thank you. You did great. Thank you. And after hearing, Eduardo's experience, it was very, very clear. And, he transmitted these messages in a very clear and precise way. Well, thank you, Eduardo. Thank you very much. You did great. And I'd like to introduce you to Tanya, but I'd like to start talking about also her support person. Tanya is going to tell us about her experience, and I will want to talk about Aneta Micheva. She works as a lawyer around human rights and mental health since 1995. She worked for the Helsinki Committee and also in the Mental Health Center till 2013. She's been an independent lawyer since, and she works with the Validity Foundation. She represented defendants in the cases of Stankovic against Bulgaria, and he's also been involved in monitoring and reviewing institutions all throughout Bulgaria. Aneta is also the founder of the Kera Foundation in Bulgaria, an organization devoted to exploring the loopholes in legislation and their implementation that bring about the violation of human rights of people with disabilities. She's also one of the founders of the Network of Independent Experts and NIE Bulgaria that includes lawyers and other experts in human rights, and they work around mental health and human rights. Aneta and the lawyers in this network, they've been the protagonists of cases to guarantee access to fundamental rights of people with disabilities, including the right that we're most concerned about today, which is the right to have access to justice. She's also a therapist, and she has developed a human rights methodology with art therapy for especially social workers and psychologists. Tanya, whenever you want, you can start telling us your experience. Thank you.
My name is Tanya. I am 38. I live in Bulgaria, and I am a psychiatric hospital survivor. Thank you very much for your kind invitation and for giving me the privilege to share my personal experience with you. I have been through so much violence that it's going to be very difficult to fit it into 10 minutes. What is worse is that all of the time I didn't even know I was a victim of violence. It's very strange how a child can grow up in an environment in which violence was a norm, and the concept of abuse was unclear because abuse and negligence were a norm as well. It all started when I was 5. My father is a domestic alcoholic, and my mom was subjected to physical violence, and both she and I were victims of emotional violence. This led to violence at high school, where girls from other classes started calling me names and making me give them my allowance. All of these combined resulted in me struggling with bulimia. In my attempts to find a solution, I met online very cruel people who caused me very serious physical and emotional harm by manipulating me to do things that can be classified as torture. Eventually, I ended up in a hospital because one of those cruel people made me cut 96 gashes on my body, which were both deep and long. At the hospital, nobody addressed the violence and talked to me about it. I didn't know it was violence, so I needed someone to explain it to me, to let me know what rights I had, and whom I could turn to for emotional and legal support. What was even worse is when my mom arrived at the hospital and told the staff that I had a mental health diagnosis. I had been taking my meds regularly, so I was not a danger to anyone. The staff told her that if she didn't spend the night with me at the hospital, they would discharge me, even though I had gotten stitched up in just a few hours ago. I'm out of that horrible mess, but many others from all over the world are going through this now while I'm talking to you about it, and they must have trained people and services to reach out to. The things that they are manipulated to do can be lethal, so having the option to have someone to share about this with is a must, and no excuse to not have one is acceptable. In the psychiatric hospitals in Bulgaria, the patient is not a person but an object, and the doctors talk about her in the third person like she's not in the room at all. Sorry, I just lost my alliance. Thank you. Some of them even make jokes or talk with irony. The whole system is a huge mess. Nobody lets patients know what they need and whom to turn to. Everything looks like a dead end, and I am doing anything I can do to cooperate to improve things. I cannot stress enough how important it is to talk about all these things publicly, because despite the stigma people who have psychosocial difficulties are subjected to, the longer we remain silent and do nothing, the more difficult changing things for the better will become. I know that changing the system is going to be a very long and painful process, but the first step must be done. It must be followed by a second and a third step instead of starting to work on things and then giving up. I'm sure I needed someone to reach out to and get access to justice. I don't know any kind of service that helps people who have psychosocial difficulties get access to justice, a fair trial, etc. What I went through is horrid, but what is shocking is that my mind managed to get used to all that abuse and accept it. I think it did that because it was desperate and was determined to survive. The last time I went inpatient was the worst one from one point of view and the best from another. I went inpatient against my own will. I had stopped eating and drinking even water for 4 days, which means I wasn't taking my medications. I wasn't violent, but refused to go to the mental health clinic. Feeling helpless, my mother called the police. There was no mobile service which could help where I lived, so my mom had no other choice but to call the cops. I ignored the policemen for as long as they could, but eventually they managed to put my arms behind my back and put cuffs on my wrists. One of the problems is that I wasn't informed I was being arrested. Another problem is nobody told me what my rights were. As ridiculous as it may sound, I didn't see even that as a form of violence. I believe they were trying to help me and were doing everything for my good. At the psychiatric clinic, I woke up restrained to the bed with an IV in one of my arms. Fortunately, the doctor, who is also a psychotherapist, who saved me from my bulimia, was working there at the hospital, and thank God she took up my treatment again. It's crucial to create a sort of social services which are violence-free. For the girl that I used to be, I want to have several things which are always available. A 24 free hotline that she can call free training and support for the family members to teach them what to do and what not to do in different situations, free training for her, which can teach her to recognize her symptoms and triggers and the different types of violence, social workers and other experts who are very patient, sensitive to violence, and can recognize it, special support for access to justice. I have no idea how this can be done in Bulgaria, but I strongly believe that even if it is difficult, it is also doable. I was blessed enough to meet a very special person who helped me realize what was happening to me, and she did it in the most tender and caring way possible. Thanks to enormous efforts, adequate help, and strong support, I am growing out of all that and have even pressed charges against the psychiatric hospital because I want everyone to have the chance that I had, and they cannot have it at the psychiatric hospital or a small group home. Last year, my father attacked my mom while she was at her home. She and I were living at a place for rent, but she decided to spend the night at her apartment. My drunken father beat her up and almost killed her. She called me in the evening and asked me to let her in the building in which our place for rent was. When we got into our place for rent, I saw that her cheek and neck were bruised. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I contacted a friend of mine who is a lawyer immediately. She told us what to do, and finally the police kicked out my father out of my mom's place, and we pressed charges against him. Mom got a restraining order, and in a couple of months they got divorced. So this was the moment in which I saw that getting help was possible. To finish my speech, I would like to say something to everyone, no matter where in the world they are. The fact that there are people who behave in a way that doesn't fit into the norms of the society in which those individuals live does not necessarily mean that they are ill, but they are going through something horrid and extremely painful about which nobody even suspects. Thank you once again for your invitation and for your time and attention.
We would like to thank Tanya. There's no doubt that her testimony is overwhelming about the pain, the suffering. We would like to thank her for her courage to provide testimony, to be here today overcoming many barriers that sometimes may seem invisible for others, but she has been able to overcome them, and very generously she has shared her testimony with all of us. Thanks, Aneta, also for being with us. And with that, we are going to close this segment about voices in justice, and we are going to turn the floor over to the next presentation about access to justice for people with disabilities, obstacles and promising practices by Wilson Mataria, an expert on the rights of people with disabilities of the International Commission of Jurists. Thanks very much for your attention.